features of our aggregation initiatives are the optimization of the European resources, the creation of services for cultural institutions and final users, with the final objective of distribute the cultural data on multiple digital platforms. In Italy, there are different domain national aggregators for libraries, Internet Culturale, for the National Archives, SAN, for the museums, Musei d'Italia. All of them feed Cultura Italia, the national cross-domain aggregator. Cultura Italia is also national aggregator for Europeana. We will focus our attention on the library aggregator and Cultura Italia because they are under the direct responsibility of my institution, ICCU. Internet Culturale was launched in 2003 and is the portal of the Italian state university, local and research, every kind of library can participate in this portal. Its mission is to promote and valorize the digital cultural resources owned by the Italian libraries. At first, Internet Culturale supports the cultural libraries for the creation of digital resources and metadata that are compliant with the national standards, in particular the MAG standard, which is the national metadata standard for library. Italian libraries are guided in this process of cataloging, creation of metadata, and digitization of library resources. Then, Internet Culturale aggregates these resources with different ways according to the management system of each library. These options, this availability of options speed up the process of aggregation because every library can choose the most suitable one. Moreover, Internet Culturale is also a digital repository. This digital repository is called Magteca, and library can request ICCU of hosting their digital masters by the Magteca, which is located at ICCU, or can ask the software of Magteca for a local implementation by their own premises. And in this case, the communication with the local between the local Magteca and the central Magteca and ICCU is assured by the OAI PMH protocol. And moreover, Internet Culturale is interoperable with Cultura Italia, the Italian culture portal, and as a consequence with Europeana. When a library aggregates its content in Internet Culturale, they can choose, and usually they do it, to publish their metadata in Cultura Italia and Europeana too. Internet Culturale is also used for our audiences, which are mainly library users, researchers, and students. All these publics can search and browse in 28 million records, which contains, for them, 14 million are the bibliographic record of the online, of the OPAC, of the National Library Services. Then they can browse the manuscripts and 16th century edition databases. They can search through the digital library database, which contains 8 million JPEG images, texts, audios, and videos. They can look at multimedia content, virtual exhibition, cultural roots, 3D reproduction, and so on. And also 6 million, they can browse 6 million records of the historical catalogs of the Italian libraries. Users have also a great visual experience because the images are published in a good quality. The images can zoom in, we will see just an example afterwards. And sometimes, if the providing library agree, the digital object can be downloaded as PDF. And also the users are guided in such a huge mass of content through themes. They can choose history and geography, social science, and so on. But I would like to draw your attention on the topic of the collection description level, because we try to give a context of to all this huge mass of metadata describing the single collection. And there are also lots of news from the Italian libraries, conference, talks, and so on. This is the homepage with the theme and it's quite similar to many others, but this is a sample search with the word Budapest, and on the left side you can see that there are over 23,000 results in the OPAC and more than 100 results in the digital library of resources. This is a sample where the user can retrieve information both about the digital object and the original document, which in this case is an historical map of the Marciana Library in Venice. This is the great visual experience I spoke before. This is the first visualization that can be also zoom in. But user can choose also different kind of visualization according to its need. Let's move now to Cultura Italia, because little by little, all the content that are published in Internet Culturale will join Cultura Italia. Cultura Italia is the national cross-domain aggregator that was launched in 2009. At present, it gathers almost 2.5 million metadata from libraries, archives, museums, galleries. Every sector of the heritage is covered by Cultura Italia. It has 50,000 unique visitors per month. It is based on open source software. The Cultura Italia operations team provides technical support for interoperability and digital library creation. And recently, Cultura Italia launched a core set of open data. We will see them later on. These are the standards on which Cultura Italia is based, that are universally known and they are quite common. But the organization of the crossworks within the metadata standards of all the sectors of the heritage are possible through, thanks to the PICO application profile, which is an application profile specifically designed for the portal for every kind of object, or tangible cultural heritage, people, institution, and so on. It is based on a qualified Dublin core and has some refinements and encoding schemas. Besides the PICO application profile, we developed a PICO Thesaurus, which is available in Italian and in English and also in SCOS format. The PICO Thesaurus that is useful for the knowledge organization has a hierarchical structure with 4 access keys: who, what, where, and when, with the following refinements. This is the workflow of the content aggregation within Cultura Italia. We selected databases. Then we make agreements with the providers. We will go back later on this point, which is crucial for the content aggregation. Then the operations team of Cultura Italia make the mapping between PICO, the PICO application profiles, and the original metadata schema. We give also further technical support for assuring the interoperability between databases. And then data are published in Cultura Italia and, if agreed, in Europeana. At present, the Cultura Italia content providers are 32. There are domain aggregators like Internet Culturale that we saw before, or SUN, and single cultural institutions. These direct providers, so to say, arrive to Cultura Italia or because they make a direct request, or we meet them from some European projects as partners, or, and this is not rare, directly from Europeana. In fact, some cultural institutions requested directly to Europeana to be part of the European portal, and Europeana forwarded the request to Cultura Italia. In this way, cultural institutions can have their metadata published on 2 platforms, the national one and the European one, and can easily arrive to Europeana, although they are small institutions and don't have enough technical support to assure their interoperability with the European portal. I spoke about the technical support for interoperability that the Cultura Italia operation teams gives. These are some samples of websites that we developed thanks to Museo and Web, which is a content management system given for free to the museums, but is suitable also for every kind of cultural institutions. And Museo Web is interoperable with Cultura Italia. So through the OEPMH protocol, the cultural institution can build its own database, its own small digital library, and send directly the metadata to Cultura Italia and then to Europeana. This is, we found this approach from the bottom very useful, because sometimes, in particular, museums are, the institutions are afraid to give their information on the web. In this way, they can start with little information, and then they grow little by little. These are the licenses that we apply to our content providers. For the articles, we use the Creative Commons attribution non-commercial generic. But for the metadata, this is most important, we aligned our license to the data exchange agreement of Europeana in order to assure the interoperability. And in fact, the metadata are licensed under the Creative Commons Zero licenses, the public domain dedication, while the timelines keep the right that the content providers assign them. This is the SPARQL endpoint of Cultura Italia, where we recently published a core of open data, taken from our content provider. And these open data are linked also to GeoNames, to VIAF, and so on. Some of you have seen and have noticed the video on open data that Cultura Italia produced, Europeana produced, that we translated into Italian, because we thought that it was valuable to explain with simple words to cultural institutions why it's important to produce open data. Cultura Italia embedded the Europeana API in the website in order to offer another opportunity to our user to browse also the Europeana content in the same website. And since all roads lead to Europeana, I would like to underline how Cultura Italia provide the content to Europeana directly, because the metadata of Cultura Italia can be exported in EDM, or through European projects. At present, the most important one, which is coordinated by my institution, is Athena Plus. Athena Plus is the follow-up of Athena and Linked Heritage. We supply Europeana with over, in total, 7 million of metadata. There are 40 partners plus one observer, and the objective of Athena Plus is to contribute over 3 million brand new data to Europeana, mainly from museum. 80% of this content are from museum, and to develop and improve the tools that were developed within the previous project. And there is also a side of creativity, which, and in this work package, we will experiment the use of rich data for tourism, education, and research. These are the pillars of Athena Plus. You have already heard about Lido from Gordon McKenna. We will use, maybe most of you know this service, MINT, the Metadata Interoperability Service, the aggregation web service created by the National Technical University of Athens. The Uncommon Culture Journal, which is an international journal for museums managed by our Polish partner ICIMS. And last but not least, the terminology management platform to which Roxanne Winks contributed, which is a product of Linked Heritage, and that will help cultural institutions in managing their multilingual terminology. These are the Hungarian partners and contributors of Athena Plus. There is the Petőfi Museums, which is also the national contact point for all the Hungarian cultural institutions that would like to contribute content to the project. And also other contributors are the Hungarian Jewish Archives, the Hungarian Open Air Museum, and the Hungarian National Gallery. I'm concluding my presentation with a short trip of this Hungarian map from the Genoa University Library to Europeana, passing through Internet Culturale and Cultura Italia.